Hello, curious and wonderful students of mine. Welcome to Individuals and Families Class 9. Spending time today talking about developing goals and formulating a contract. Um, some of the goals that we're going to look at in this particular chapter reading is really understanding the importance and things to think about as we consider developing goals and entering into contracts with the clients that we actually serve. So, with no further ado, let's get to it. So, for the purpose of the time that we're going to spend together today, looking at this particular chapter, what we're wanting to make sure that you understand, or that if you do the readings and work through the assignments, is that the outcome for us is to have a better understanding of the purpose and the functions of goals, to articulate the difference, or should I say articulate the relationship between the goals and the target concern, make sure that they are specific, feasible, measurable, monitor and measure progress towards goal attainment, as well as formulating contract or service agreement. So thus far in our lectures and in the previous courses, we've talked about, or should I say in previous chapters, we have talked about engaging with clients, looking at various interviewing techniques, looking at barriers to communication. So really spending quite a bit of time focused on the assessment interview aspect of the work. And so as we start to think about goals, we have established a working relationship. We have some sense of what some of the issues are, and clients have also come into the awareness about the issues that face them. And so now we're looking at moving towards goals. So what do we want to see different? So what the outcome needs to be. And so as we think about goals, we need to also think about the things that are listed here on the screen as it relates to making sure that they are purposed and they are targeted, and that we're distinguishing the program objectives and the client's goals. That we need to also understand those various influences in terms of what affects how we create the goals, as well as the environments and the conditions and the resources. And so we'll touch on some of these. Keeping also in mind that there are basically three types of goals that you will come up with, or that you will help develop for the clients that you're working with. A behavioral goal is a goal that's really designed to look at changing behavior. So an example might be to increase the frequency that a client pays their rent on time, or so that's a behavior that's specific that we could look at, and actually looking at developing a number of tasks to help clients reach that particular goal. A shared goal, on the other hand, is one that's held in common, and it's agreed upon by members in a different system. So, it often involves brainstorming. So this might be a family system in which there are issues around communications, or the way that they might treat each other. So there's a shared goal in that if we can change the outcome, and the outcome is for us to have better working relationships, then that's shared. And so everybody has some responsibility in making sure that that particular goal is reached, as well as they have input into the development of that goal. And then reciprocal goals are goals with some elements of shared goals, but they are also developed in conjunction with all the parties that are involved. And so reciprocal goals will more than likely involve agreeing upon exchanges of a different behavior, or to act or to respond to each other in a different manner. So it's kind of a give and a take. And so as we think about reciprocal, so again, as you're looking at goals for the clients that you're working with, thinking about how they line up with what we just discussed. When we think about guidelines for selecting and developing these goals, these are the things that we really have to pay some attention to. The first bullet talks about goals related to results that are sought by the voluntary clients, or the people that come to us voluntarily seeking our help. What do we want their goals to be? It's different for the next bullet when we think about involuntary clients. And as we know, involuntary clients are clients who are receiving services under duress. Oftentimes there may be court intervention or some other form of social consequence for folks not necessarily following through. So you've got an audience that doesn't necessarily want to be there or see the value in the goals that need to be met. So how we develop those goals for that particular population will look different. Good goals also must be explicit. They must be clear. They must be in measurable terms, and they must be feasible. If you've got a person who works a 40-hour work week, is parenting 5 kids, and has a fairly hectic life, then when you're thinking about goals that you want that particular person or tasks that you want that particular person to be involved in, then that needs to be taken into consideration. So how feasible is it for a person to maybe spend 4 hours a day working in a therapeutic group when they have these kinds of things that they are tasked with on a daily basis? So again, feasibility is very important. Making sure that the goals are consistent with the knowledge of the practitioner. So again, practicing kind of in your own level of comfort and in your own backyard, so to speak, and making sure that the things that you set are things that you clearly understand and can help the clients attain. And they also need to be consistent with the functions of the agency. And then also, I think it's important too to recognize that in this goal attainment process or goal development process, that there might be goals that we may have some reservations about you or your clients, and so it's about understanding that and maybe not doing those particular goals at this point in time. So here's some examples of some goals and general tasks. So keeping in mind again that the goal is kind of the overall outcome that we're shooting for, and the tasks really are defined as the steps that we will need to actually take in order to actually reach that particular goal. So also thinking about goal development as it relates to minors, and as you know by now, when we're working with the minor population, there's some different set of circumstances that kind of guide how we move forward. So again, also wanting to get a sense of understanding how the particular minor or the person that's underage actually sees the problem, making a determination about whether they're coming to you voluntarily for help or whether they're being coerced in some form or fashion. Being able to define and specify the behavior that needs to be changed, so as concrete as possible. And then also considering the age and the stage of development and cognitive ability of the client that you have in front of you are all things that you will have to really take into consideration when you're starting to look at developing those goals. So negotiating goals is this process of really looking at how do we assess client readiness, how do we assess what the needs of the agency are in terms of being the provider of service to help reach those goals. It's about how do we manage and work through those things. And negotiating goals, explaining the purpose, the functions, negotiating goals with involuntary clients. So these are all a part of that particular process, the things that are here that are listed in terms of things that we'll have to be aware of when you're looking at negotiating goals. And so I'll pause and give you an example of what negotiating a goal with an involuntary client might be. Let's say that there's a case that comes in and part of the complaint is that the client has a severe chemical dependency issue and is chemically dependent to the point where they can't function. So they've come to the attention of the agency because this caused them to be in a situation where they neglected their children. And so again, they're involuntary clients, so they're not really seeking out our services, but our services are actually being directed towards them with the potential of consequences if they don't comply. So I've got a person that is saying to me as we're doing the assessment that I don't have a problem with chemicals, I can pick them up and I can put them down whenever I get ready, and it's just an unfortunate set of circumstances. Okay, so we have a situation here that causes me to be involved because of chemical use, and I'm hearing you say that you don't have a problem with chemicals and you can actually control the use of that. So what we're going to need to do is, if that's the case, is to be able to prove that you have the ability to actually do that. Oh, no problem, no problem. Okay, so what if we were to think about having you do a Rule 25 assessment, which is a chemical health assessment that talks about your potential need. Well, I don't really need to have a chemical dependency assessment. Like I said, I can just stop, I'll stop tomorrow and that'll be the way. But how do I know that you're able to actually hold up that end of the bargain? So could we maybe put in some assurances around me making sure that using is really not an issue, or is something that you really have stopped doing? So maybe one way to do that might be to have you do random UAs. So in other words, if it's not an issue and you're able to stop, then why don't we set up a system where we have random UAs? You get a call, you go and you drop a UA, and if that UA is clean, then you're true to your word. And if we can do that for 90 days, then it would suggest to me that you don't have a problem with chemicals. Okay, we can do that. Now, however, on the other hand, what we need to also do is put in a fail-safe plan as well. So if in that 90-day period you miss a UA or UA comes up dirty, then we're going to have to revert to plan B, which would be to go to get a chemical health assessment and then to look at potentially going to treatment. Is that something that we could live with? So I'll give it a chance to work your way, but then if it fails, the ultimate goal is, again, to get the using under control. So an example quickly of what a negotiated goal might look like for a person who is involved with a system and chemical dependency issue. So monitoring progress and evaluation. So methods of monitoring and evaluating progress. So we need to have things that are specific in terms of what they're going to look like. Who will do what, by when, under what circumstances, is a good formula to think about in terms of what a complete goal might look like. Complete with the task in terms of doing step A, B, and C to get to that goal, and usually they're associated with time frames. So again, making sure that they're specific, measurable, and feasible goals, and that there's a way of recording and maintaining and monitoring that particular progress to make sure that it's actually happening, or to look for that particular specific or problem or behavior to be changed. There are also a number of tools that can be utilized in terms of this, depending on the nature of the goals that you are setting with your clients. So there are some tools that have been tested and are fairly reliable in terms of looking at how we measure clients' stick-to-itness, I guess, for lack of a better word, of the terms that we've set forward. So this is an example. Say if we've got a person who is maybe having some cognitive difficulties or some emotional struggles around anxiety, then it's about actually maybe having them do a rating about how often they're actually feeling anxiety and what kind of situations are coming up or what's happening for them. So this Likert scale, where they could actually gauge that, and that's a way for us to determine whether there's an increase in the frequency of these particular episodes or whether they're getting better based on what the intervention is. This graph is another way to look at using a qualitative tool to take a look at anxiety and how often it happens for people and over a period of time. So this tool could be a helpful tool as well. The logical analysis effect, of course, informative events or critical incidences, and monitoring progress of those qualitative measures, like using the tools we just talked about, are ways for us to also look at that measurement and evaluation. Contracting, as we move forward, we want to make sure we pay attention to the things that are listed here too. In the process of developing a contract or a treatment plan or a case plan, we need to make sure that we're wanting to develop contracts where the goals will be accomplished, that there are clear roles for all the participants. So you as a social worker have a role, client has a role, the intervention and techniques that will be employed, who the service providers are going to be, how much time we're looking at in terms of from start to finish with this particular program. Frequency and duration, stipulations for renegotiating. These are all things that need to be thought about as you're putting together that final document in terms of the plan for your client, in terms of how they're going to be successful in this particular endeavor that you've set out for them. So that really kind of brings to a conclusion the narrated lecture portion of our time today, in terms of really looking at, again, the importance of developing goals and formulating contracts. So across your social work career, you will find yourself doing this. This is the written agreement. This is the contract. This is something that all parties are agreeing to as a result of very thorough assessment that has been done, identifying the problems from the perspective of the agency that works to provide the service provision, as well as the clients who are receiving them, in some agreement about what needs to change. So it's a very important part that includes clear documentation about what happens as we move forward in terms of our work with clients. So again, I would encourage you to read the chapters and come to class prepared to be involved in any in-class exercises or have questions about this process of developing goals and formulating contracts. Thank you, and I'll see you in class.